I think we've let all of our participants in. Welcome, and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm looking at so many colleagues and friends from many school districts and schools and county office, California Department of Education joining us today for our session to continue the conversation on biliteracy, the webinar series. As you're coming in, many of you have already introduced yourself in the chat, but please take a moment to also sign in. And we want to thank you for being here with us on this 9th day of May 2023, where we recognize the love for this profession. Happy Teacher Appreciation Week to all teachers, to all educators. It's so great to really be in this space with you together, to recognize the commitment to the profession and that labor of love as we're expanding minds of our children and bringing in a lot of our talent. Thank you for investing in yourself through this professional development network. And we are going to just kind reminder, because we are on this current slide, this is the Biliteracy Webinar Series. And we'll have a follow-up to this on May 16th. If you're registered, you'll be able to join us on May 16th. So once again, a warm welcome and good afternoon. My name is Dr. Alma Castro. I'm the director for the Multilingual California Project. You're joining our webinar today on Pathway Towards a Multilingual California. We're continuing the conversation around biliteracy attainment recognition and the State Seal of Biliteracy. And joining us today to help deliver and facilitate today's session are great colleagues and friends from CABE, who you'll see in just a moment through another slide, but just to wave a quick hello. Sarah Kennedy, our professional learning specialist, Alexandra Ramos, our administrative assistant, Isela Jacobo from San Diego County Offices of Education. We also have Holly Harding from Butte County Offices of Education. Thank you again for coming in this afternoon. Part of this work is also made possible through the vision of our CABE CEO, Jan Gustafson Correa, and the entire CABE team that works collaboratively to really bring together information, resources, and policies that we can implement some practice components to. So we want to thank all of our CABE team for ideating with us, including our CABE lobbyist, Jennifer Baker, who continues to champion legislative policy to support our 1.1 million multilingual learners. So as we continue with introductions, we know we have a couple of our MCAP leads that are with us today. I'm going to go ahead and just call out the names of all of our Multilingual California project leads. Our project leads include Holly Harding from Butte County Offices of Education, representing her LEAs or districts from Chico, Thermalito, and the rest of the different districts listed here. We also have our great friend from Fresno County Superintendent of Schools, Lisa Clark. We want to say thank you for supporting this work. Dr. Nicole Chavez from Orange County Department of Education. Angelica Hurtado from San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools and her representing districts. And of course, our great friend who you'll hear from today, Isela Jacobo from the San Diego Offices of Education. Thank you, MCAP leads, for all of the work that you're doing to implement professional development and build capacity across the state with educators, paraeducators, administrators, and families. We know that the Multilingual California Project is a 3-year grant funded by the Educator Workforce Investment Grant, professional development through the California Department of Education. And together, this passionate this passionate group of colleagues from across the state has really worked hard to bring information to the field on how do we recognize our students, on what supports do our schools need, and how do we continue to build on those pathways to biliteracy. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and welcome Holly to share a little bit more about our MCAP purpose. Welcome, Holly.
Thank you, Alma. Hi, everyone. So if you've been in our MCAP trainings before, you'll recognize this slide. We've been using it for about 3 years for our grant. It's just a reminder that really this work is about the English Learner Roadmap and the 4 principles around the English Learner Roadmap. And so you are here because you're learning about the Seal of Biliteracy and ways that you can help improve your program in your district. But we believe also that program, the Seal of Biliteracy, is aligned very strongly to our EL roadmap for our English learners. So this is just our reminder that we all are working towards implementing this EL roadmap in our school sites and in our districts using all 4 principles from that English Learner Roadmap. Next slide. And today, if this is your first time in our Seal of Biliteracy series, welcome. There will be some presentation on the new research and policies around multilingualism and learning languages. You will be able to differentiate between the possible pathways and the recognitions that you could be offering in your school district. You will be able to explore some of the requirements and, most importantly, see some examples of what that might look like. And then we will be preparing all of our communities, and hopefully you will be preparing your community to continue promoting this Seal of Biliteracy in our communities, and so that all of our English learners, all of our students are attaining biliteracy and multilingual languages. So we are going to, actually, Isela is going to talk about our next slide.
Thank you, Holly. Buenas tardes, good afternoon, colegas from across the state. We're so excited to be here with you sharing on this content today. So as Holly pointed out, our focus today is definitely the Seal of Biliteracy and the new bilingual pathway recognitions. Today, we'll be focusing very specifically on the bilingual attainment recognition. So thank you so much for being here. So recognizing, colleagues, that over time in our state, the state of California has gone from being a primarily English only state to one that most recently really works on affirming and welcoming, embracing multilingualism. So we've definitely gone over time, as we move on to the next slide, from policies and guidance that were very centered around English to new policies and guidance from our state that, again, reminds us of the importance of affirming multilingualism in our communities and our students. So this timeline that you're going to see on the slide as it's coming in is one that I'm sure that most of you are very familiar with. It's a timeline that we've seen in our work, in the work we've been doing with CABE, with the Multilingual California Project, with Californians Together, and EL Rise. It's a timeline that definitely celebrates the many milestones that we've accomplished again in our state when it comes to bilingual education. One that takes us from guidance we received as the first Spanish language arts standards were developed here in San Diego County office. Very proud of that. And it takes us to and through the most recent years where we've had, again, a number of different milestones that have been very meaningful, significant, and important in this work that we do with bilingual education. So notice as you're looking at the timeline, not only our ELA-ELD framework, not only the Common Core standards in Espanol, but also the Common Core Spanish language development standards. So the translation that was produced in our state, the augmentation that was produced for us to be able to serve in our dual language classrooms. Notice the Seal of Biliteracy. Notice other critical documents such as the Proposition 58 guidance document from CDE to our parents, the Global 2030, One that I'm particularly excited about was published in 2019, and it's a California Practitioner's Guide for students with special education needs who are dually identified. One of the most recent publications that we use in our work every day, the Improving Education for Multilingual Learners. So again, just a number of different milestones that we should be so proud of in our state. As we move on to the next slide, there's a couple things that we want to highlight in regards to this work. So as we try to summarize all this, this evolution that we see in bilingual education, really focusing on how over time we as practitioners have improved our understanding of how children and even adults learn languages, the support and the importance of valuing and affirming home languages, the primary languages that our students bring from home, the importance of increasing the support for students who are classified as English learners, as well as our students who are identified as dual or dually identified students, the recognition of the benefits of dual immersion programs, not only for English language learners, but for all students who we serve in our systems, the recognition of the connection between language, culture, and power. And then with Prop 58, we really want to bring to our work together and center this notion of how now through this Proposition 58, our parents have the right to request bilingual programs at their schools, a right that had almost gone away with Proposition 227, and we now see came back with Proposition 58. So a lot of history when it comes to bilingual education in our state. So as we move to the next slide, we would like for us to just make a quick pause to take a minute and reflect on the following prompts. So what are the policies and perspectives toward bilingualism that have affected you as a learner and or an educator, perhaps as a parent or a community member? The next prompt is, have you learned or educated in programs based on misunderstandings of how language acquisition works and the value of multilingualism? So I'm going to make a quick pause here as you reflect. And given that our time with you is so short today, we're going to ask you to please volunteer and share your reflections in the chat box. So we'll make a quick pause. And we'll move on to the next slide. So colleagues, we just, again, as we were looking at this timeline, reminded ourselves of Proposition 58. Proposition 58 is so meaningful and so significant for our communities. It's really what brings back to parents the right to request a bilingual education program in their communities. So what we want to show on this particular slide is the progression that you're going to find described in a guide that comes to us from CDE that my colleagues are going to be sharing in the chat box. So as parents and their communities identify the need or express their interest in requesting a new bilingual education program and present this request to their districts, to their schools, then our districts are responsible for receiving this request and confirming the receipt of this request when a threshold is met. And this threshold at the district level is 30 students, and then 30 students per school, and then 20 students per grade level. Once this threshold is met, then the district is responsible for confirming that the request for a new bilingual program or a bilingual program has been presented to them as a system. After that, once we've acknowledged that this request has been made formally, then the district needs to engage in research and investigation that allows them to provide a formal response to the community, to the parents who made this request. This all needs to happen over a period of 60 days, as you can see on this one slide. After conducting this research, this investigation, the district is responsible for responding to the parents who submitted their request, giving them a yes if in fact the district can implement the requested program. Yay, exciting news that our community is always happy to hear. Or a no if it's not possible to implement the program at the time. Their response from the district, the response from the district to the parents, to our community, needs to be one that includes an analysis of the details that were considered during the research that was conducted. So again, this is a very meaningful process, one that we really want to highlight and stress given the audience for this session today. So let's keep this in mind as we move on to the next slide, which is one that allows for us to provide our communities, our parents, our families with a number of different resources. Again, because of time, we don't have the time to go into each one of these resources, but we do want to highlight a resource that comes to us from the Office of English Language Acquisition at the federal level. It's called Benefits of Multilingualism. And this is an infographic of the cognitive, educational, economic, and social cultural benefits of being multilingual. We also want to highlight another resource that comes to us that serves the purpose of clarifying some facts and myths about the benefits of bilingualism or the development of bilingualism. And one other one that comes to us from our very own California Department of Education, that it's a parent's guide to multilingual education. This is one, again, that provides families with their rights to request a bilingual education program in our state for their children, and then the very specific steps that I described in far more detail. One of the things that we want to make sure you know as you access the resources listed on this particular slide is that the Parent's Guide to Multilingual Education is available in a number of different languages in order, again, to be able to inform a majority of our community members. So you'll find links to the translations into other languages in our resource folder. So hopefully you'll go into the folder and find that guide in other languages other than English and Spanish. As we move on to the next slide, and we continue to set the stage for our conversation today, we really want to again highlight Global California 2030. So those of us who have been in this system, in this field for a while, know that Global California 2030 was published in 2018 upon the passing of Proposition 58. And it's basically one that, again, sets very hefty goals for our state. So you can see two of them there. By 2030, the expectation that half of all PK through 12 students will be participating in programs leading to proficiency in 2 or more languages. And then by 2040, that 3 out of 4 students are earning the State Seal of Biliteracy in our state. The Global California 2030 sets very specific measures of progress for us, and we'll see those on the next slide. So as per this guidance from our state, the measures of progress that we're to look at are if in fact we're growing the number of dual immersion schools in our state, if in fact we're growing the number of new bilingual teacher authorizations in a per year basis in our state. We're looking at measuring our progress, but also looking at the number of bilingual teacher preparation programs at state. And as we're looking at the number of students that are currently participating in world language classes. And moving on to the next slide, we see that we are definitely moving and showing progress in a number of these markers. So this particular slide shows the number of State Seal of Biliteracy, or the students who have earned the State Seal of Biliteracy over time. And we really want to bring your attention to the top languages in which this seals of biliteracy have been awarded. particularly in the last year. You'll notice that this data is still preliminary from CDE, but one that is definitely worth celebrating. So I want to call your attention to not only the number of different languages, but also the number of State Seal of Biliteracy awards that were given just in the past year. Notice that in our state, it's more than Spanish. We see Chinese, Hebrew, Korean, French, etc. Earlier, we were talking about parents having the opportunity, the right to request multilingual programs in our state as they approach our systems. The programs that you see on this particular slide are the ones that are listed on this guidance from CDE, the Proposition 58 guidance that I was mentioning earlier. So you'll see that there are a number of programs. You'll see the definitions for each one of them. Notice that we have programs that really focus on developing multilingualism, and there's a number of them. And then we have in gray transitional bilingual programs, which we know that are offered in our state, but we know given the research that we have available in our field, that it's not one that is conducive to high levels of proficiency like Global 2030 calls for. We do want to highlight this slide because, again, often when we're thinking about multilingual programs, our mind immediately goes to dual language immersion programs. It's critical for us to recognize that given the diversity of the demographics we serve, the diversity of the districts in our state, there's a number of different programs to select from given the immediate needs of your community. One that I really want to highlight and bring your attention to is the one-way immersion, the one-way developmental bilingual program, which is one that is intended for all English learners. As we move on to the next slide, we also want to recognize that our systems in the state provide, in addition to multilingual programs, a program that it's called Structured English Immersion, SEI, an instructional setting that we know it's one that's available throughout the state, one that is not or does not have bilingualism as a goal. So please do note that or make that note. Our state is positioned to meet and surpass Global 2030 goals as we look at the next slide and we connect with some data. So in California, it is critical that we recognize that there are many different languages that are spoken. When we look at the data, we see that according to very recent studies, only 11% of all people living in California speak only English. The rest of our population are bilingual, multilingual. We also want to bring your attention to the fact that California is home to the second biggest Spanish-speaking population in the US after the state of New Mexico. We also want to highlight that so in California, the number of Spanish speakers in the US is expected to continue to grow. And according to the experts, by 2050, there will be around 140 million Spanish speakers in the US. So this will make us the biggest Spanish-speaking population in the world. We want to acknowledge that Chinese, Mandarin, and Cantonese is spoken by over 1.2 million people in California, and Tagalog is spoken by 800,000 people in California. Notice on the right of this one slide, many other languages that are listed there with the number of people who report to be speaker of those languages. And as we click on this particular slide, I also want to bring your attention to the fact that there are so many California Indian languages, Native American languages spoken in our country, in our state, that should also be elevated and looked at as we're looking at providing multilingual opportunities for those who we serve. I'd like to move on to the next slide and take a pause here for us to reflect, and then give you an opportunity to share via the chat box on the following prompts. So who does your district serve currently? What are your demographics? What languages are spoken in your community? What are the existing and or potential multilingual programs offered in your district? Are you, for example, offering FLES or FLEX or DLI? Is it DLI two-way or one-way? Are you providing one-way developmental bilingual programs in your community? We would also like for you to reflect on how are you currently embracing, affirming, and building on your community's linguistic assets. And if we can have a couple volunteers here in the chat box, that'd be wonderful. So we'll pause here for a couple seconds before we move on. And as we pause, I'll hand it over to my colleague, Sarah Kennedy.
Thank you so much. And I'm so excited to be here with so many educators from across the state. And we're talking all about biliteracy, and many of the information we gave earlier is talking about the importance of bilingualism, and in that history, that trajectory of policies, we know that we've learned to value bilingualism. But today we are specifically talking about recognitions of biliteracy, and we'll be talking about programs through the lens of biliteracy. So I really wanted to make sure we honed in on that term. Biliteracy is beyond just being able to speak and understand more than one language. It's the ability to read and write and have access to more academic language as well as more casual language. So we wanted to note that in Spanish, you'll see many different terms for this. Here at CABE, we're trying to be consistent and use biliteracidad. But you'll also see this as lectoescritura, alfabetización bilingüe, or en dos idiomas. So I just wanted to acknowledge that there's many different terms for this. And this is a point of clarity when we're thinking of what we're cultivating in our programs and what we're recognizing and how we're figuring out benchmarks, because this includes not just the ability to speak and understand. So many of our students come to us bilingual, speaking here in California. So many of our students speak more than one language, especially as they've been in English programs in school. Even if they speak another language at home, they might just from being in school be able to speak and understand. But we really want to make sure we're encouraging biliteracy, giving that ability to read and write, and to also understand and use academic language in more than one language to be truly biliterate. So with that clarification, we are going to be talking today about some of the recognitions of biliteracy that are available here in California. The State Seal of Biliteracy is one that's been around for a few years, so many of you might already be familiar with it. And then the new pathways, there's 3 of them, and we are going to focus more on the Biliteracy Attainment recognition, which I consider it to almost be like the State Seal Junior. It's a recognition of achievement at the end of 5th grade or at the end of 8th grade, whereas the State Seal of Biliteracy is given to students on their diploma at the end of high school. So these 4 recognitions across the PK-12 trajectory are all available to schools in California. Because it's so much information and some of this is very new, we have split this content into 2 webinars. This week, we'll be focusing on the State Seal and the Biliteracy Attainment recognition. And then next week, we'll be digging in more into the biliteracy program participation recognition, the home language development recognition. But something that I want to emphasize is that now with these additions of the recognition, the pathway recognitions, there really is an opportunity for every school to recognize biliteracy. And it's also a nudge to show that there are ways that we can cultivate biliteracy no matter what our program models are. So let's dive in first with the State Seal of Biliteracy. And I always like to include a photo from a State Seal of Biliteracy ceremony. This is from our MCAP partners in San Bernardino, because as we're talking about recognizing biliteracy, this is what we are going towards. This is what we would love to have the majority of students in California earn the State Seal of Biliteracy at the end of high school. And to earn this, they must demonstrate proficiency in English and at least one other language. And so I always like to include a photo of those students' faces. You can see their joy and pride, because this is what we're going for at the end of the PK-12 journey that we have our students with us. So with the State Seal of Biliteracy, these are the current requirements, and my colleagues are going to help me put a link in the chat to these requirements. This is the poster that's available from the CDE. So to earn the State Seal by the end of high school, students have to demonstrate proficiency in English and at least one other language. And when it comes to English proficiency, that's determined by their ELA course requirements, their GPA in English classes, and also the CASP, which they take in 11th grade in high school. And then for students who are currently English language learners, they need to reclassify getting to a 4 on the LPAC. And this is something that we know has been a barrier to some students getting the State Seal, because that's something that only is taken once a year in the spring. For the second language proficiency, which we are trying to refer to this as a partner language, because for some students, it is not their second language, it is their first language, or it might be their third or fourth or fifth language. But for the partner language, another language other than English, they need to demonstrate proficiency in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And to do that, there's a few different ways to do this. There are some assessments here that are mentioned. I do want to note that the SAT 2 has been discontinued. If students who are already in high school already took it, they can use that, but that's being phased out. You have the option of the AP placement exam, the IB exam, or other locally approved assessments, which we'll give you some examples of those later today. But it needs to meet the rigor of an AP exam and test all modalities of communication in the language. That hits on that biliteracy piece. So the other option is coursework, because for schools that have 4 years of a language, that can count as long as they get a 3.0 GPA or above. But the important thing to note is that they need to demonstrate oral proficiency in the language. And shortly, we'll see some examples of what that might look like. So I wanted to highlight those two things. There may be more specific questions later for what this looks like in your setting, but those are some things that have come up in common questions and that we really wanted to highlight. Now, I wanted to clarify that difference between the pathways and recognitions. So in recent years, California has been focusing a lot on creating pathways to biliteracy from PK through 12. So programs and program models that will allow students to earn the State Seal on their high school diploma. I don't know if this is surprising to anyone here, but the minimum requirement of 2 years in a language in high school does not always cut it when it comes to actually being able to demonstrate proficiency in those 4 modalities. So the idea is that California has been focusing on different pathways, whether that's dual immersion, whether that's exploratory in elementary, and then more courses in middle, and we'll give you some examples of that. But now, as of 2021, the state has added the focus of identifying and celebrating some of those key steps on those diverse pathways to biliteracy with the new pathway recognitions. And there's a few reasons for this. One is to celebrate students, but another one is we want to see benchmarks and see how we're doing towards that goal of Global California 2030. We have the metric of State Seal recipients, but that takes 12 years to see whether or not we've gotten there. So that's why these pathway recognitions is a helpful way for, along with celebrating the different pathways that will lead students to being biliterate, the state can see, all right, this number of students are getting these pathway recognitions, and it's a way to indicate how we're progressing towards those really lofty goals of Global California 2030. So, for example, the Biliteracy Attainment recognition in 5th and 8th, which we'll talk more about, that might be a good indicator that those students are going to be ready to get the State Seal upon graduation. And it's a good way to track that and adjust as needed. So with these pathways and programs, we've got a variety of recognitions that we can use as celebrations and benchmarks. So these are those new biliteracy pathway recognitions. These are pretty new. A lot of people are not familiar with these. I know personally, I learned a ton from even preparing for this webinar series. So the main purpose is to recognize the progress towards proficiency. But as I said, there's also that added benefit of providing a benchmark to locally, but also to the state. So in 2021, 2022, over 37,000 awards were granted of these recognitions. So there are 3 recognitions of participation in biliteracy programs, recognitions of developing home languages for English language learners in particular, or students who do not speak who speak another language at home. There's recognition of activities either in school or at home or in the community that is helping them maintain that. And then there's the Biliteracy Attainment recognition, which I like to think of it as a State Seal Junior. And that's what we're going to focus more on today, because it sort of is connected to the State Seal as far as needing to meet those proficiency levels. So this recognition is available to students at the end of elementary school and the end of middle school. So 5th and 8th grade, generally. And this is based on proficiency, like the seal. So it's awarded to students who meet specific proficiency criteria in English and 1 or more languages in addition to English. And it's aligned with those State Seal requirements because the idea is that we are preparing students to get the State Seal by the end of their high school pathway. So when it comes to those biliteracy criteria for English and for the partner language, there's several ways that students can, that schools can determine students' proficiency. So in English, they can measure that on the CASP because that's something that students take in elementary school every year after 3rd grade. You can also in elementary school, the second method is you can use another local assessment because there are other, beyond CASP, there are other local assessments districts might be using to measure English proficiency. Or at the middle school level, you can measure it with language arts coursework, whether that's measuring their GPA, like you do with the State Seal. And that's more of an option in middle school as far as grades go. And method 3 would be through the LPAC. This would be for students or English language learners. If they're taking the LPAC, then they are demonstrating those 4 modalities of language. And the 4th method is with a portfolio, which would demonstrate those different modalities as well. For the partner language, similarly, you can choose between 2 methods, a local assessment, and we'll get some examples of what that might be, or a portfolio. So they do need to show proficiency in those 2 languages, but unlike the State Seal, which is actually in Ed Code, these criteria, there's a little bit more wiggle room because first, I think it's partially because it's so new, but also it's suggested, and so districts have the options to adapt this and choose between the methods that work best for them. So it's a little bit less strict. So with that said, this could look a lot of different ways. So we mentioned there's a lot of different pathways to biliteracy. It might be, it might be dual immersion, PK through 8, and then high school courses. And then if you go through all those, you would hopefully be ready for the State Seal at the end of graduation. Perhaps it might be dual immersion, PK through 5, and then a separate middle school where you would have courses in a language and then more courses in high school. That might be an option. We know there are also schools that don't have any bilingual program or maybe have one-way immersion, elementary FLES program. And in that case, maybe the bulk of their language learning would be happening in high school. But still, the idea is that there are language courses that they could take in high school. It is going to be trickier. I would say that if your school has no bilingual program, your district has no bilingual program, PK through 8, you probably will have a lower number of students qualifying for the State Seal because that's how language acquisition works, but it still is an option. So with there's a lot of different ways. Every district has built their own language pathways. When it comes to recognitions, with the biliteracy attainment recognition, if you have a K-8 school system, you could give it at the end of 8th grade. Maybe it's part of that graduation ceremony. Same thing for PK-5 schools, and if there's separate middle schools, it might be available for schools that perhaps have a FLES program. So maybe it wouldn't be every student qualifying. It might be just students who are able to meet that level of proficiency. But either way, this is sort of markers at the end of those programs. So with that said, the other recognitions, we're going to go into a lot more detail later. And we're really going to focus next time at the home language development recognition, because that's something that everybody can incorporate. So I do want to show some other examples. We're going to move into, we're going to show an example of what Sweetwater in San Diego is doing. But I just want to remind you, this might look different depending on if you're a union school district feeding into a high school district, if you have separate elementary, middle, and high school districts, for unified districts. And I did want to do a very quick call out to this project that we have with San Diego State University. We know that biliteracy doesn't end in high school, and this is a project through MCAP and San Diego State University. Is a new university seal of biliteracy and cultural competence. I had the opportunity to be present at the first ceremony giving that seal to students who qualified at the university level, showing both biliteracy and cultural competence. So if you work at with or at a higher education institution, then please keep this in mind as a model. And we'll be sharing more about that in the chat. For now, we're going to come back to San Diego Unified in a moment, but I would like to welcome Marina, who's going to share a little bit about what Sweetwater Union is doing. Marina, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Sarah. She's rushing to me because I have another 4:30, so I have like 5 minutes left, and then I have to run off. I am the World Languages TOSA for Sweetwater Union High School District. If you're not familiar with my district, we are in San Diego, but in the southernmost part of San Diego, just with the pretty much on the Mexican border. The majority of our students is bilingual, somewhere along the spectrum of bilingual. We have students who speak many languages, not just Spanish, but of course, just like you said, showed earlier, Spanish is definitely the most spoken of the second languages in our school district. So when the Seal of Biliteracy changed the rules a little bit, I think it was 2019, 2020, I was just starting this job as TOSA. We wanted a way to have students who had 4 years, because you need the 4 years of that second language to qualify for the State Seal of Biliteracy, a way for them to demonstrate their oral proficiency before the AP or IB exam, because we have lots of AP and IB exams. We have 7 different languages that we teach here, and almost every single one of them, except for Filipino, has an AP exam, or Spanish and French, we have IB exams as well, that students can take to demonstrate their proficiency. But we do have plenty of students who take 4 years but don't take an AP exam. So we wanted to make sure that they had a way to attain or receive the seal as well. So they developed their own oral proficiency exam, and we actually, our students take the exam every year. So they don't take it only in the 4th year of language, they take it 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year. Each year is a different exam. So the goal for us is for them, when they get to that 4th year exam, the exam is basically the AP exam. I'm an AP reader. I've been reading AP for a very long time, so the AP exam is sort of a no-brainer for me when it comes to the speaking part, because that's actually the part that I read. I'm also an IB teacher, and I've been doing IB oral exams for my students for 20 years. So with those two experiences, I figured I could come up with something that would apply to everyone. Because if you wait until that 4th year to give students an oral proficiency exam, and it's the first time that they see anything like that, then it's a little bit too late. But in my opinion, they have to be trained or grow, let's say, to be able to do the test from the exam, which is the one that we're using is the cultural comparison of the exam. So in order for them to get there, what they do is every year we call it our oral proficiency performance test. We do it in the fall, we do it in October, November, and depending on the year is what the prompt is going to be for students to present about. So first year students will present about a target culture product. Keep it really simple. You know, teacher will suggest what that product is, or some way. Well, you can see that later because there's links to our exam on here. I gotta go in 2 minutes. In second year, students present about a target culture practice. In third year, they present about a target culture perspective, but they don't make a comparison. The idea is just to, talk about that perspective. First year, second year, they only talk for 1 minute, or we try to keep it around between 1 minute and 2 minutes. And when they get to third and fourth year, then it goes up to 2 minutes for third year, and they can go up to 3 years in the fourth year exam. And they present. So in the fourth year exam, they do a comparison of a perspective. So they have to give both sides. They have to give the perspective of their own community and compare it to the perspective of the target community. So our students in 2021, it was our pilot year. So we had only like 2 classes do it, mine and one other person, like nobody wanted to do it. But they only tested the students that were eligible for the SSB, right? For the State Seal of Biliteracy. Last year, we had about maybe 60 to 70% of our teachers who gave the performance task, the full performance task to all of their students. And we'll see next year because every year it grows a little bit more. And the reason we have them test their students in October, November is because this gives us plenty of time to collect scores, for them to submit their scores, for us to, because the process is long. They have to, if they do the exam face-to-face, because it's one-on-one, then they need time to, of course, grade all those things. If they collect it as a video or an audio, they still have to listen to them. And one important thing is that we follow all the parameters of the AP exam. So they have only 4 minutes to prepare, then they have to speak, whether it's face-to-face with a teacher or on a recorded, with no notes, right? They cannot do it at home. It has to be in the classroom in front of the teacher supervised the whole time. And so we do it early so that if a student doesn't, you're in fourth year Filipino, for example, we have a lot of students here taking Filipino. There's no AP exam, so there's a lot of students who qualify for the SS for that, who grades the exams. Each teacher grades the exams themselves, and then they submit the scores. And I'm very happy to answer all the questions that you would like. I think Sarah, you linked it here somewhere, right? The instructions for that we did want to do that. Sorry, I'm being called because I have to go. I think he's going to share my contact information, and I'm very happy.
Yes.
Later on. I am so sorry. Thank
That's
you very
okay.
much for having me here. And any questions, email me. I'll be happy to talk to anyone. Okay. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Marina, for talking to us even while you have to run out the door.
Yeah.
I did put the link to your document and then your email so folks can ask follow-up questions.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Marina.
I'm sorry to run.
Thank you, Marina.
Run away, but I have to go. Bye-bye. Thank you.
We all understand it is May, people. This is the reality. So I am going to hand it back to Isela for another example from San Diego Unified as a way to see what another district is doing.
Thank you, Sarah. And before we move on to San Diego Unified, I just want to give another big shout out to our colleague Marina Dillingham from Sweetwater Union High School District. Again, showing us how where there's a will, there's a way. So if we go back to that one slide and we look at the many different languages that not only they're affirming and celebrating, but they're awarding the Seal of Biliteracy on, it's just amazing. Notice the number of programs that Sweetwater currently offers. And again, questions, comments, anything you need, as Marina expressed, she's available to connect with you. So please see this as another opportunity to continue to expand your network. I want to move on to the next slide. And before I get started, really wanting to recognize my beautiful colleagues, Silvia Uloa and Marta Osuna Jacinto, who I'm sure are in the room. Another two people that are just warriors, strong advocates when it comes to multilingualism, and also always available to connect. So the example that we want to show next is from the San Diego Unified School District here in the San Diego County. The work that our colleagues are doing in San Diego Unified is one that really affirms not only student participation in dual language programs of different types and models, but also that attainment of bilingual proficiency, not only in English, but also in a partner language. So on this particular slide, there's a couple of things happening. So we want to make sure that you see that San Diego Unified is giving their students certificates and other awards for their participation. And then as they meet the requirements that they've established to earn the Biliteracy Attainment recognition. You'll notice on the slide that beginning at the kinder level, students receive a participation recognition, and that carries through a number of different grade levels. And this is so critical because those of us who have been involved in dual language education for a while and any type of bilingual education know that we experience attrition. So we need to make sure that we're celebrating students who are participating and staying on this path, that we're celebrating the efforts that those families are making to stay and keep that focus. Notice how San Diego Unified is providing certificates at key grade levels, in this particular case, 5th and 8th. They chosen, because this is a local decision, to call their recognitions, they're a certificate of achievement, and it's a certificate of achievement in 2 languages. Again, notice English and then partner language, because they happen to have dual language programs that focus on a variety of different languages. We want to make sure that you take note of the criteria that they've established locally and see how, when you compare this criteria to the slide that Sarah was sharing earlier, you'll notice how San Diego Unified has chosen to apply method 2 and 4 to determine that their students have attained proficiency in both languages at those grade levels to earn their recognition. At the very bottom of this one slide, you'll be able to access a link that San Diego Unified has made available to us with slides that they're utilizing in their district to share with their community on the number of recognitions they've established, to make sure that principals have a way to report back to district on the number of certificates that are being awarded. And you'll also find a link to a frequently asked questions document that our colleagues Silvia and Marta have created. Again, Silvia and Marta are great resources, so please make sure that you take note of who they are and that you connect with them. As we move on to the next slide, just a quick reminder on the requirements or the criteria, I should say, that is suggested by CDE that we apply in our LEAs. And again, wanting to highlight that San Diego Unified in the previous example has chosen to focus on method 2 and method 4. For the English component, and then for the partner language, method 1 and method 2. The next slide is Sweetwater, so we'll skip that one and we'll go to the one on assessments. So I haven't been able to follow along with all the comments that you guys are making in the chat, but thank you for participating actively, and I'm sure that my colleagues responding to your questions. Two things that I do want to connect back to: Native American languages. If you're interested in resources for Native American languages, please do contact me. We have our great Dr. Stacy Block in the Multilingual Education Department, who is doing tremendous work with our Native American communities here in San Diego, and always willing to share. We have a number of statewide grants that allow for that sharing and for that continuous development of work to serve those communities. So please do reach out. And I also want to connect back to a comment that I read on community colleges. Absolutely. So not only our universities should be looking at providing a state seal of biliteracy for those students who missed it at the high school level, because perhaps they were newcomers, or other stories and implications that we know impede currently our students' ability to earn the seal of biliteracy at the high school level. But absolutely, community colleges, yeah, let's make it happen, California. So not only IHEs, but our community colleges. So how do we bring this to that level so our students have multiple ways of earning this award and this recognition? On this particular slide, I noticed a number of questions had to do, or comments had to do with assessments. So we're making available to you a number of different resources. There's a list from the San Diego County Office of Ed, my county office of it, on the various assessments that our LEAs are currently using. Again, with a focus on the seal of biliteracy. There's another list here from CDE with a number of approved assessments that you might want to take a look at. We also want to highlight a couple examples of assessments that are being utilized in our regions. You'll see a few links there to the Avant, the ACTFL, etc. We want to make sure that we state that we're not endorsing one or the other, and this is why we're providing numerous lists with many choices for you to look at. As we move on to slide 42, we were supposed to be providing you with an opportunity to collaborate and have a conversation with other people in our session today. But unfortunately, as we ran out of time, we are going to need to pivot here a little. So this is going to be a reflection opportunity for you as you head out from our session today in the next few minutes. But we would like for you to go back to your system, go back to your teams, your staff, your communities, and think about, so what is the current state of multilingualism in your school, in your district, in your community? Where are you today? Where are you now? And start thinking about, where do you want to be in 5 years? So we heard about Global 2030 and the hefty, lofty goals that in measures that we're all responsible for here in California. But where do you want to be? Where do you want your system to be in the next 5 years? And then as you're thinking about your current reality, where you want to be in 5 years, also please head into action and start developing an action plan that will allow you to meet that vision that you're setting for you, for your team, for your system for the next 5 years. There is a document that you'll see linked on this particular slide that I'm sure Sarah is making available in the chat box that will allow you to engage in this reflection, not only individually again, but hopefully with a group that sets your plan forth. It really takes a village to do this work, and it's collective work. So our hope again is that you go back and you engage in conversations with others to make this happen in your community. I'm going to hand it over to Sarah as we wrap it up.
Thank you so much. And I just want to acknowledge that this is a lot of information and that there are a lot of questions. Feel free to keep putting them in the chat, and we're hoping we're providing some places for you to reach out and see more. But just, I wanted to acknowledge this is very new content. And if you, we'll be sharing our contact information at the end too. If you have follow-up questions, we would love to engage with you in figuring out this work, because the pathway recognitions in particular are very new. And for now, this might be related to your next step. So we do have the second half of our biliteracy series for educators is May 16th. We're going to focus more on the home language recognition and the program participation recognition. So please attend that, invite your colleagues and administrators. we're recording this session, this will be available along with all the many, many links we've been putting in the chat. We have them all in one link. You might also want to share family information with leaders committees, the DLAC, ELAC, PTA, things like that. Getting that family support is so important. That's why we started with family sessions, giving them this information, engaging with the history of how language policy and perspectives have changed and what their rights are now, and how they can be involved in advocating for biliteracy. Your parents are going to be a great support in this. So we'll be sharing resources for them as well. So think about some of these possible next steps. What's next to have this conversation? And even though we weren't able to engage with the breakout rooms today, I put a document to the 3 Horizons document in the chat. This is a way to kind of have that conversation, whether that's with the DLAC or ELAC or with your colleagues, with the language department, whatever makes sense for your setting. And I do, for those of you who are currently giving out the State Seal of Biliteracy, I encourage you to engage in an equity pause. Look at who is getting this seal in your district and who is currently not qualifying and why. We've heard from some districts where they have the State Seal available, but because of the program models available or the supports available, almost none of their English language learners are qualifying. And that, to me, that might be an alert that to reassess what the program options are, what the supports are, maybe what the requirements are locally. So we wanted to really raise that equity piece for you. Now, I am going to put a survey in the chat. We have these free resources available for you through the Multilingual California grant. So please, please, please fill out the survey. The link is in the chat. This allows us to collect data for the state, but also get your feedback. That helps us shape offerings going forward. As you are taking that survey, because you're educators and you are master multitaskers, I am going to share some resources with you very quickly. However, if you are feeling, oh my goodness, she is going through this incredibly fast, I have one link with all the links in it. So don't feel stressed if it feels like you're trying to take notes. So we did want to share some resources to continue this conversation in your own settings. We do have a biliteracy network. This would be a place to sign up if you want to connect with other educators who are maybe engaging this with this work themselves. And you can add as much or as little as you want. Maybe you just want to put your email, maybe you want to put LinkedIn, whatever you use to connect with other educators, feel free to use that. This, especially if you have newer programs or you're trying to develop programs, we wanted to remind you to think about how your biliteracy programs and recognitions are enshrined in your policy. So there's some examples, and my colleagues, I believe, are putting these links in the chat as I'm going through here. There's examples of board resolutions in San Diego County. There's a draft. Dr. Castro's a member of the board in Linwood, and they have a biliteracy resolution. Keep in mind, this needs to not just be something talked about and something done in the schools. It needs to be on paper in those board policies and resolutions. And there's some toolkits here for the LCAP process for helping your families engage with this as well, making sure these priorities are there as well. We have a bunch of resources from the CDE. These are CDE resources that we've highlighted here on both the State Seal and the Biliteracy Pathway recognitions. Again, those ones are newer. We have some resources we've created. We have a Seal of Biliteracy website, which some of these resources are so new that they're not even on our website yet. They're in the process of being updated, but we have them here for you. We have the family sessions, including recordings. These are sessions in Spanish. So the resources and slides are English and Spanish. We had a two-part series for families that you can share with your communities. And then here's the link to that University Seal of Biliteracy and Cultural Competence, which we hope will be a model for other institutes of higher education. We have a summary of all the recognitions and some specific questions to ask at schools. We put these resources together specifically for families, but it might help you as well. That's available in English and Spanish right now. And then there's that 3 Horizons document again to kind of guide conversations. Again, we do have that next session next week. We hope you'll join us. If for some reason you got this Zoom link forwarded from a friend, please make sure you're registered at that link so we'll be able to send you the Zoom link for next week. And for those of you who teach or support Asian language programs, we have an Asian Languages Network coming up to specifically look at supporting those programs. This is a focus for CABE right now. We also have, through our same grant, the Multilingual California Alliance Project, we have digital academies. Even though our grant is sunsetting, we have these digital academies that will live on. And these are for educators, but then there's also family academies being launched. And finally, we do have our contact information here. I know I went through that very fast. We are going to be able to stay and answer some questions. We're so grateful so many people showed up. And again, I'll put that link with all of the links in the chat.
Sarah, thank you so much for the information that was shared. Friends that are here with us still, I want to thank you for your time and remind you that, yes, if you have some questions, a lot of really good questions have already been included on the chat. We appreciate those. And of course, we have some follow-up to do on some of those questions. Great idea about developing a Google Doc where folks can just drop in their questions so that we can respond. So we appreciate your suggestions on the survey. We're going to be developing something like that so that we can share it on a future session. We also have shared as a follow-up, generally we'll email participants, right? So that you have the opportunity to register for the next session. And I did see a lot of questions regarding finding resources for assessments for other languages. And I know that that's a huge need. So we look forward to identifying where those resources are. I know through our partners in San Diego County Offices of Education, they do have additional resources to share with you. So we do look forward to seeing you to the part 2 of today's conversation. And we want to thank you again for being here with us. And thank you, Sarah, Holly, and Isela for facilitating today's session. I'll hand it over, Isela. I don't know if you have additional closing for us for today.
Thank you, Dr. Castro. Colleagues, again, it's been wonderful to be in this space with you and see the excitement when it comes to really implementing more opportunities for our students to be recognized for their multilingualism. You have our contact info on the slide deck. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I've connected with a few via the chat. We have a number of other resources that we want to make available to you. For those of you who are interested in less common languages, or perhaps I should say languages that are becoming more common in our communities, please stay tuned and don't forget to come in to part 2 of our series. We will focus on the home language development recognition, and that's such a great beginning to, again, continue this affirmation of multilingualism that needs to happen in our communities. Thank you, everyone, and buenas tardes.